Vicky at the Listen In. Thank you so much for joining me. The story I'd like to share with you now is an Oscar Wilde story and suitable for older children and adults. Now, I've come to Welwyn Garden City in my home county of Hertfordshire to tell you this story today, and there are two reasons for that. The first one is it's Hertfordshire Year of Culture, so if you're in the county, hello, and if not, welcome along. It's a story for everyone. Secondly, it's also the Welwyn Garden City Centenary, 100 years since it was founded by Ebenezer Howard in 1920 as part of his Garden City movement, which aimed to combine city living with the benefits of having outside space and being closer to nature. Now, I'm just outside the Howard Centre, which was named after Ebenezer Howard, and just behind me there's a commemorative plaque to Ebenezer Howard, which I'll show you after the story. So I'm here in Welwyn Garden City to tell you an Oscar Wilde story as a tribute to Ebenezer Howard. And although there was no direct connection between those two people as far as I know, they did live at around the same time, about 1850 to the 1920s. And I'd like to think Ebenezer Howard would have liked this story. It feels like a fitting tribute to his legacy. And so to celebrate Hertfordshire Year of Culture and the Welwyn Garden City Centenary, I present to you my slightly shortened and adapted version of Oscar Wilde's The Happy Prince. High above the city, on the very top of a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. Admired by all around, he stood proudly overlooking the whole city, covered in thin leaves of fine gold. His eyes were two rare sapphires, and in his sword hilt was a radiant red ruby. One autumn day, there came flying over that city a little swallow on her way to Egypt for the winter. Her friends had gone ahead and she had some catching up to do, but she knew she needed to rest before the next leg of her journey. And as she flew round that city, she saw that very same statue and decided it would be an excellent resting place.
Ah, yes, a beautiful golden dormitory, quite up to my standard. Perfect.
And she swooped down and nestled in between the feet of the Happy Prince. But just as she did that, a drop of water landed on her. Whoop!
Oh no, I don't believe it. The weather here is rubbish. It's raining again.
And then a second drop of water fell. Whoop!
Oh no, it's no good. I'm going to go and have to find myself a chimney pot instead.
And then a third drop fell. Whoop! And as the little swallow looked up, she saw the most extraordinary thing. Tears were streaming down the beautiful golden face of the statue. She flew up onto his shoulder.
Hello, who are you?
I am the Happy Prince.
Oh, I'm not being funny, my friend, but you don't look so happy.
And the statue explained to the swallow that in life he had been nicknamed the Happy Prince because he lived in a beautiful palace where there was no unhappiness or sorrow ever. He had lived a life of love and laughter and had no idea what hardship was. But now they had put him on the very top of a tall column overlooking the whole city, and he could see pain and poverty and suffering. And although his heart was made of lead, it made him very sad.
Can you believe it? His heart is made of lead, not of gold? Disappointed. But never mind. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. Soon I'm going to Egypt because winter is coming and my friends are there.
Well, before you go, I need your help. Over there, down below, do you see? There is a seamstress in a tiny room. She's worked so hard sewing that her hands are red and sore and her fingers are cracked and pricked by the needle. She is exhausted and hungry. By the side of her work table, in a tiny bed, there is her little child, sick with a fever, thirsty and calling out, but the poor mother has nothing to give her except water from the river. She's worked so very hard, and she has so very little. Little swallow, please, will you take the ruby from my sword hilt and give it to her? Little swallow, please, will you do as I ask? Well, the happy prince's face looked so sad that the little swallow did as she was asked. She carefully plucked the ruby from the happy prince's sword hilt, and she flew with it right across the city and through a tiny window into the room where the seamstress and her child lay, both exhausted and troubled. She placed the ruby down on the seamstress's work table and she flew away. And just as she flew off, the little child, through her fever, thought she caught the flash of a jewel and the flutter of cooling birds' wings, and she fell into a deep sleep at long last, thinking maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. The swallow flew back, right the way across the city, and although it was a cold night, she felt a tiny bit warm inside, and she nestled back down in between the happy prince's feet to rest. The next day, the swallow felt a great flood of excitement. This day, tonight, she would get to go to Egypt. Tonight when the stars come out, I get to go to Egypt. Tonight when the moon come up, I get to go to Egypt, she sang at the top of her voice. And that night when the stars came out and the moon came up, she flew to the happy prince's shoulder. I'm leaving for Egypt now. Goodbye. Wait. Please, I need your help. Over there, down below, the other side of the cathedral, do you see? There is a student in a tiny attic. He's worked so hard to finish his work, but his eyes are too heavy to carry on, and now the fire has gone out, his hands are too cold to write. He is exhausted and cold and hungry, with no money for food or firewood. He has to finish his work, but he just can't. He's worked so very hard, but he has so very little. Little swallow, please, will you take the sapphire from one of my eyes and give it to him?
No, I cannot take one of your eyes because it's really disgusting. And apart from anything else, I have to leave for Egypt because winter is coming and my friends are there.
Little swallow, please, would you do as I ask? And the face of the happy prince looked so sad that the swallow did as he asked. She carefully plucked one of the sapphires from his eyes, and she flew with it right the way across the city to where the student lay in his tiny attic with his head in his hands. She carefully placed that sapphire on the student's rickety desk, and she flew away. And as she flew off, the student, through his bleary eyes, thought he caught the flash of a jewel and the flutter of birds' wings, and he thought maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. The swallow flew right the way across the city again, and although it was another cold night, she felt a tiny bit warm inside, and she nestled down in between the feet of the happy prince to rest, knowing that tomorrow she would get to go to Egypt. Well, the next day came, and the swallow felt great excitement. That night she would get to go to Egypt. Tonight when the stars come out, I get to go to Egypt. Tonight when the moon come up, I get to go to Egypt, she sang at the top of her voice. And that night when the stars came out and the moon came up, she flew to the happy prince's shoulder. I'm going to leave for Egypt now. Goodbye. Wait. I need your help just a little more. Over there, down below, in the market square, do you see? There is a little match girl. She has to sell all her matches, otherwise she will be in terrible trouble. But it's such a cold night. She has nothing on her feet, and her clothes are so thin and warm, and she shivered so much. that she's dropped her matches in the gutter and they are wet and spoiled. She's crying. She has worked so hard and she has so little. Little swallow, please, will you take the sapphire from my other eye and give it to her?
No, please don't ask me to do this. If I take your other eye, you will be completely blind, and as well, winter and Egypt and my friends.
Little swallow, please, will you do as I ask? And the happy prince's face looked so sad that the swallow did as he asked. She painstakingly plucked out the happy prince's other sapphire eye, and she flew with it down to the market square where the little match girl was shivering and crying, and she flew round the little match girl and she carefully slipped that sapphire into her hand. And as she flew off, the little match girl, through her tears, thought she saw the flash of a jewel and the flutter of birds' wings, and she dried her eyes and she ran all the way home thinking maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. And the swallow flew back across the city, back up to the happy prince with that warm feeling again, so maybe it wasn't that cold after all. And she flew directly onto the happy prince's shoulder.
Happy Prince, you are blind now, so I will stay with you, always.
And she told the happy prince all about Egypt and all about the wonderful things her friends would be seeing. The river Nile, the lotus flowers, the pyramids. Oh, little swallow, and now you are my eyes. Please fly over this whole city and come back and tell me what you've seen. So the little swallow did that. She came back and she told the happy prince how she had seen huge opulent houses with beggars sitting at the gates. She had seen the thin, drawn faces of the hungry as they wandered the cold streets. She had seen children huddling together underneath a railway arch, trying to keep warm, and they had been moved on, ordered back out into the wintry night. Little swallow, you see that I am covered in thin leaves of fine gold. Please, take that fine gold and give it to the people in the city that need it. Little swallow, please, do as I ask. And the face of the happy prince looked so determined that the swallow did as she was asked. She carefully took each one of those leaves of gold and she took them round the city to people who needed them, and soon the city was transformed. Those thin, drawn faces, they looked healthy and beaming. The children played with vigour and joy. And although a bitter cold winter had come on, folk had warm fire in the grates, hot food and warm clothes to wear. But the little swallow got colder and colder and weaker and weaker. And before long she came to the shoulder of the happy prince.
Happy Prince, I'm going to leave you now. Goodbye.
Oh, you're going to Egypt?
No, my good friend. I'm not going to get to go to Egypt. I'm going to go to sleep. Forever.
And with that, she fell down dead in between the happy prince's feet. At that very moment, there was a dull crack from inside the happy prince's chest as that lead heart broke in two. It must have been a very cold winter for that to happen. Well, a few days later, the mayor and the town councillors were walking round the city, and they gathered round the statue of the happy prince. Shabby, dull, worn out. Oh, dead bird. Oh, Outrage! Pulled down, replaced. Another prominent figure. Who?
Who? Who?
Myself? 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 And I think they're still arguing now about who it might be next. So the Happy Prince statue was pulled down and it was melted to make another statue. But a strange thing, that cracked lead heart wouldn't melt. It just wouldn't. And then the little dead swallow and the cracked lead heart were gathered together and taken up to heaven, since they were the two most precious things in the whole city. And they stayed together forever. Well, I hope you enjoyed my slightly shorter and adapted version of Oscar Wilde's The Happy Prince, and hopefully you'll enjoy finding and reading the full and original version as well. So before I go, I just wanted to show you this commemorative plaque to Sir Ebenezer Howard. It's just outside the Howard Centre. There's a lovely picture of him in the middle, to Sir Ebenezer Howard, 1850 to 1928. And round the edge here it says, founder of Welwyn Garden City in 1920. His vision and practical idealism profoundly affected town planning throughout the world. So from me here in sunny Welwyn Garden City, I wish you a very happy rest of your day. I wish you a very happy Hertfordshire Year of Culture and a very happy Welwyn Garden City Centenary. Bye for now.